All right, so today I'm joined with Eric Robinson, a former FBI agent, and he has quite a wild story. I actually didn't really want to spoil the idea of you being an FBI agent because there is a chapter before you're an FBI agent that I really wanted to touch base on, and then we'll get into the FBI story. So, Eric, thanks for joining us. Why don't you just give a quick second to introduce yourself, and we'll dive right on.
Well, that story of what I did before I got into the FBI is one that I'll often spring on people, and I would keep patches with me for FBI patches that if people could guess what I used to do, I'd give them a patch. And so we'd go around and I would get, math teacher and plumber and, everybody trying to be funny, like, oh, you used to be a stripper. And then I would say to them, I was a Baptist pastor. And then folks would laugh. And then they'd look over at my buddies and they go, no, really, he was. So in April 2002, it was Easter Sunday. That was the last Sunday I preached at my church. The next Sunday, I was in Quantico, Virginia. And then the Sunday after that, I preached in the chapel in Quantico because they didn't have a chaplain.
So you're pastoring a church, and you were there for about 10 years?
Well, I was in different Christian ministries, so I had been an associate. Well, the usual way, if anyone's familiar with how churches often go, was a youth pastor. Then I was an associate pastor at a different church. And then that church said, we'd like to plant a church in the next town over. And I said, I'd like to be a part of that. So at the age of about 26, my wife and I took a core group of about a dozen people, and we started a new church in Western New York. And that church was meant to be one that reached out to people who maybe felt like they didn't fit into churches otherwise. So we didn't want to just grab folks and like, hey, let's have more people giving their money who used to give it there, but now they're here. We meant to create a situation where people didn't have an excuse for not going to church. And so with that and that core group, I gave them a flinch test to say, hey, are you going to be able to handle if somebody comes in and they're just wearing a concert T-shirt and that's not what you wear to church? Or if they
definitely not a Baptist church.
Not the one that we planted off of. It was suit and tie every day. But I'd ask them, like, are you okay if somebody comes in and you smell alcohol on them? Is it okay if you see interracial, transgender, gay people? Like, we want everyone to feel comfortable in our church and not just to say you're welcome, but to make certain that you were not giving off any kind of vibe that said, I'm also judging you too.
Right.
And we did very well with that. But what happened for me is that the people that we welcomed to the church were also bringing with them many issues in their lives. And I found it myself incapable of separating myself from those problems, from not internalizing what they were going through. And so for 2 years straight, I had stress-related headaches every single day until I told my wife I need to find something with less stress. So I joined the FBI.
I mean, most people, when they step away from ministry or step away from the pulpit, it's usually to like run a summer camp, or it's to go into a less stressful job. So what, I guess, did you always know that you wanted to be an FBI agent? Like, when did that itch start coming about?
I always knew I wanted to be an FBI agent the same way that most people do. I started thinking of, well, what should I do? And I applied for 2 jobs. One I was overqualified for and one I was underqualified for, and I got the FBI one. And it's just the kind of thing you think, well, FBI, that seems pretty neat.
Yeah.
And after 24 years, yeah, it was.
Oh, man. Did your family take it well when you were I'm leaving the church?
Yeah. Family was always supportive. At the time, the immediate family was just my wife and our 1-year-old. But, my dad will wear FBI gear so that the cashier at the grocery store will ask about it. And he'll go, oh, yeah, my son's in the FBI. And when we sit down, he tells me stories that I told him that I don't remember anymore.
I mean, you did mention 2002. There was a very patriotic heartbeat in America at that time. Did that have anything to do with it, the September 11th, or not really?
Well, it did in a sense. I had applied well before September 11th, and then my application was in process during that time and probably expedited my hiring. And when I say I was underqualified, I had studied to be a missionary to Muslim countries. So I had a good understanding of Islam. I had interacted with many Muslim people, and I have a feeling that that probably had some hand into why I got picked to be in the FBI. And then with that, that knowledge, going to graduate school to study about Islam, they sent me on a drug squad. So that's how that went.
Makes sense. So when you walk me through the application process, like it's not like applying for a job at Best Buy or anything, right?
It was about a year and a half or 2 years for me.
Were you just like fired up and ready to go?
Well, the crazy thing to, in a sense, finish the story is the day that I got accepted into the FBI, my headache stopped, which was, I think, an indicator that that was the right choice. But the process, to your question, this was almost pre-internet. So everything that I did, you know, you have to fill out everything you've done, everywhere you lived since you were 16, everywhere you've worked, extended family, and without just going on the internet to look things up made it quite difficult. So it was all on paper, and I remember it being maybe 50 pages long of all that I had to fill out and then send in. And then there's the process that you go through. I took a test. It's kind of like an SAT, and I'm in there with a number of other applicants. And I remember taking the test, and I'm a fairly smart guy, but I remember taking it and go, well, at least I tried.
Yeah.
And then they called me back and said I made it to the next round. I'm like, oh, that's a surprise.
What was the hardest part about that transition?
The hardest part easily was the entity of the FBI. There are countless aspects of the FBI I don't know or understand. So there's so much to learn about not just how the process works, but all the acronyms, how to work cases. Like that just continued. I'm humble enough to go to this kid who's been in 3 years, and he just happens to know of this type of program or this contact that we can have that's going to help exploit something else. So
was there any like parallel, I guess, between, because I think for a pastor, a big part of it, especially the church that it kind of sounds like you were in, you have to get people to trust you as a pastor in a sense to believe what you're saying, to buy into whatever the vision you have it for the church is. What is that parallel like in the crossover between being a pastor of a church and getting people to trust you and then trying to get informants to get people to trust you? Is there any, or is it completely different, different protocols?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Many of the principles that I had learned in ministry and I think probably are just part of my nature of relating to people, showing them kindness first, even with some of the criminals, showing them humanity and understanding. I would get bad guys to tell me things they shouldn't be telling me because I'm treating them in an unexpected way. So yes, we've broken down your door. Yes, I shoved a rifle in your face. All of that has happened. That is me coming into your life saying I'm fully in control. But now as we're sitting down, now I am treating you in a way that helps you through this process. I came in and I got you in trouble, and now in a sense I'm kind of your savior because you need to know what's going to happen in your life. What are the next steps? And because of that, and because I was open and I wasn't slamming my fist on the table and yelling, a lot of times these criminals would then start a conversation. And once we've started the conversation, well, here we are. Now we're discussing things maybe we shouldn't be discussing, not in your best interest.
What's it like to bust down a door? I've never busted down. I don't think many people have.
It's great.
Is it adrenaline? Is it like an adrenaline rush where you're just like, I'm ready to go, and you go for it?
Yes, but also it's not just. So I was one of a few breachers on our SWAT team, and people would make fun as if it's just all brute, but there is a lot of knowledge and science to it of where you've got to hit, and mainly doing reconnaissance and viewing that door ahead of time so you know how to step up and where you're going to take the door out. So with that ram, if I hit more than twice, I feel bad. So, one hit pop, that's great. Older houses are much better because they're constructed strongly, and so there's not that give. But what I've often said, and I've taught classes on breaching, that I am the most important person on the SWAT team, because if the door doesn't get open, the job doesn't get done. I'm also the least valuable, because here I am standing in the threshold of a door with just a ram in my hands and no gun, and I got to get out. I could easily get shot.
You're the first person. You're the first person that they see?
I shouldn't be. I should be hitting that and rolling out and knowing what my footwork is, so the next guy can come up with a rifle and provide cover for me as I'm exposed.
Did it ever go poorly? Like trying to bust down a door and you're like, that could have gone a lot better?
Not for me. We've had a few. Like, I've had one where we'll do a call out first, and a guy will come to the door, and then we see how it was barricaded that he had opened, and I thought, I never would have broken that. I have breached a door that had a couch behind it, and that took me about 8 hits, but I also moved a whole couch across the room. And then I had a colleague down in Cincinnati who got shot through the door, didn't realize he was shot, thought he had just got
hurt himself?
Some wood. Yeah. So he felt something, but he didn't realize. And that's part of what's going on. I've been in situations on 3 occasions where shots have been fired in my vicinity, and all 3 times there was a question of, was that a gunshot? So the whole idea of thinking while you're in it, you'll know, here's a colleague of mine who shot through the door and nobody recognizes he was shot. And other times I've been in places where I go, I think that was a gunshot.
And do you still go through with it?
In that case where he was shot through the door, he didn't know that it happened. The kid who shot through the door fired once and then hid the gun. And so, then when they came in, put his hands up, and it wasn't until this guy was like going to the ambulance to just get himself checked out, did they say, well, here's a gun. And then the medic go, hey man, you got a gunshot.
That is crazy.
So yeah, they went through it, but they didn't realize, like, hey, we were taking fire.
Imagine being in a position where you don't know if you got shot or not. You still got to do your job.
Yeah. We had one occasion where we had a barricaded subject. It was a woman who was having a mental break, and she was in a basement apartment with her 10-year-old son. And so we were letting the negotiators take care of it. But our trigger was going to be if she started to threaten her son, which she hadn't yet, or if she fired a shot. And that's one of those occasions where we were just down the hallway with 8 of us and other operators ready to enter if needed, where we were ready to enter. And one of the triggers was if she fired a shot. Well, we had sent a robot down the hall to speak to her through the doorway instead of having negotiators yell down the hall. And she, whatever the buzzing was, said to her that was not good. And she fired a shot through the door. And I remember looking at my team leader going, that's our trigger. And I remember thinking, not so much that I was afraid, but just at the reality of, this is going to hurt because some of us are going to get shot, which is what she had said she was going to do if we tried to enter. Fortunately for us, guys got on the radio, said, hey, we still don't think she's threatening. Let's negotiations play out. That played out. Another team took over for us and immediately shot her in the head.
Oh, I did not expect that story to end that way, but
yeah, I don't think she did either. Yeah.
So in terms of negotiation, did you ever do any of the negotiation tactics or not really?
No, we had our crisis negotiators. So when you look back to how the FBI worked with SWAT or HRT and hostage rescue team and negotiators, like with the Branch Davidians, if you've seen documentaries, they were at odds the whole time. So we have evolved greatly from there to when I first came on SWAT. If you were a negotiator, we'd say, hey, you're on duty. The team's got a hit tomorrow morning. Keep your phone by you. And so if something broke, you were ready. to now where negotiators are fully integrated with the SWAT team. They're in the armored Bearcat with us. They're doing call outs over a loudspeaker. Another negotiator is doing call ins.
When you say that you're SWAT, is it the FBI version of SWAT or?
It is. So it's an ancillary job. So through all 24 years of my career, I was an investigator. I was a special agent doing whatever violation. And then also on top of that, I made time for SWAT. We were all agents just like the others. We just got more training and a few cooler tools.
So you were based out of the Midwest. Does that mean that you're primarily only working in the Midwest, or are you kind of going all over the country?
Our area of responsibility for the Cleveland division, where I worked out of, was the top half of the state of Ohio. And so we were from Indiana to Pennsylvania down to north of Dayton. And that was our territory. And then when the Detroit division says, hey, we've got 6 guys we're arresting, we could use another tactical team, Pittsburgh calls, Buffalo calls, we would go to our local ones. And then occasionally there's call outs to special events such as the director or attorney general going overseas, or a massive roundup in San Juan, Puerto Rico. And so now they got to fly folks down. So typically it was within about 6 different divisions around Cleveland, Cincinnati, Indianapolis, and then occasionally out to beyond there if it was called for it.
What does the FBI, on a day-to-day basis, obviously your job is going to look different than someone else's job, but what did your job look like? Like what did you say that you did?
Well, it depends on what year it was. I started out with Mexican and Colombian drug cartels in Chicago, and so that meant month after month of us being on wiretaps. And we would have an informant buy off of a drug dealer. We would hit that drug dealer and get access to his phone, and then we'd roll up on his boss until we got up onto a larger supplier. So then my day meant either I'm working a wire shift, listening to phones, I'm on surveillance supporting the wire shift, or I'm in the office writing reports based on surveillance from the things we did the day before. With gangs, similar. With public corruption, it would be a lot of interviews. With crimes against children, my wife would ask me, so what do you got on your schedule today? And I would get angry because I said, I don't know. I know what I plan on doing, but some 14-year-old girl is going to be running away, and then I'm going to spend my whole evening trying to find her off the streets and save her from a pimp. So it could be anything.
Yeah. Were you ever like an informant? Did you have to start there or no?
No. So I would recruit informants, and those would, in the dope world, it was often a guy that you had a case over and you pressed into working, and he was working off time. And so in the last third of my career, when I was working national security, by far those informants were individuals who likely had come from a high placement in another country to the United States, or they had connections in high places back in other countries of interest and could report on that, so we could have foreign intelligence, or we could insinuate them into situations where we already had an investigation going or needed to learn more about some subjects.
Like, I don't know, it sounds so cool to be like, oh, I'm listening to a conversation and you're trying to get it. But I feel is there a lot of like, I talk to my friends on the phone, and I guess, if someone was listening, I think they'd be pretty bored pretty quick. Well, but maybe I'm not a bad guy either, so maybe that's
right. Exactly. And we've been on phone taps before where I go, this guy's not doing anything illegal. Like he may have in the past, but he's not now. But on the other hand, we had a phone tap on a guy who was selling crack, and we're trying to roll up to his supplier who was known, and we believed that this kind of OG drug dealer was going to be his supplier, and then we wanted to roll up to that guy's supplier. And I remember sitting on this crack dealer's phone, and his phone was ringing like these guys were addicted to crack or something. Like it was constant. So a call comes in, and you'd need to transcribe it, But like here I am trying to type what that call was, and boom, here comes another call, and it was just rolling. And then when we rolled up to the OG, to the guy who was his kilo level supplier, now it calmed down. Now it was, occasionally dope calls, and then a few from there and on. But that case was interesting because that was a case where we executed a surreptitious search warrant on this guy's supplier.
What does that mean?
So normally when I execute a search warrant, I have to leave you with the documentation that says, here's why a judge said I could have this invasion into your home. The surreptitious search warrant, we get the okay from a judge to enter a home. And then we also get further okay from a judge to not tell you. So we're basically breaking into your home and stealing drugs. So we had worked up to the supplier's supplier, and he was in a nice apartment building just south of Chicago, maybe within the city limits. And there was one way in and one way out, and it was a gated garage. And so I was driving. I had to wait until the gate went up for somebody to leave, and then buzz down the ramp blind around a corner to get into the garage. Fortunately, we did that, and everybody's safe. And then as we sat in a draped van to watch the subject's vehicle, we saw him leave. And then guys went upstairs, used that ramp, busted open the door, and stole $1 million worth of cocaine from him.
You did?
Yeah. And when I say steal, we seized it legally.
Yeah.
But in this guy's mind, someone just stole $1 million of cocaine. And that's on consignment. So he's needing to sell that to pay the cartels in Mexico. So that was an interesting conversation afterwards on the phone.
So then do you arrest him or no?
We do eventually. And
Okay.
There's been a couple of times when we've engaged in situations like that where we've had to arrest guys in order to save their lives. Like we've stolen heroin from a drug runner, and then he reports back to his supplier, and the guy's like, you owe me the money. And then we've caught on the phone plans of the supplier going to kill that guy because he thinks he's lying, and we've had to go in and
Get him.
arrest him to make sure he's safe.
How long? I mean, I guess you're pretty much trying to always get up this ladder. Is that correct? Like you're trying to, especially in a drug situation, you're trying to always get to the bigger guy. How long does it take you to get to that?
Well, the process in theory is simple, and it could be done easily where I'm just going to buy, party amount of cocaine off of you, and then I arrest you. And then I either let you go and try to exploit your phone, and I write a Title III wiretap on it, or I get you to work for me, and now you make a dirty call to your supplier's phone, and we keep working up that way. In theory, it's just a step-by-step process. It could take a long time, though.
You probably get used to it, but there has to be a level of fear, right? Going into some things, or not really?
I don't know about other people. It wasn't for me. And I don't know if that was because I gotten through everything fine, and here I still was. The confidence I had in my training and the abilities of those around me, I definitely would have, my heart rate go up a bit. And I think that's normal because the body says, hey, you've got to perform. So let me give you a little boost to make sure you can get there. But there wasn't fear. Again, the adrenaline might be going like while I'm sitting on surveillance, and all of a sudden now I'm going 100 miles an hour through traffic in Chicago trying to catch up to people.
I get scared like sledding down a hill. I can't imagine are most of these like when you're going in, is it usually like the middle of the night or no?
Sometimes it has been, but for the most part, we try to go early morning because you're definitely asleep. I mean, middle of the night, these guys are out, partying.
Yeah, doing whatever.
Yeah, depending on who we've got. And we might be arresting a cop, and so we're trying to mitigate things and make it so as safe as it can. And so it might be using his chief to call him in. And any number of things could take place. We try not to involve vehicles because now you got a couple 1,000 pounds going at an unknown speed that can cause harm. So there's a lot. We try to mitigate danger to us and to civilians surrounding us. People are always interested, and as long as they're just sitting on the porch, that's fine. And I remember one dope bust we had. We took it down in a McDonald's parking lot. And, as we were staged in vehicles and then we rushed in with guns out, rifles out, going past vehicles, my boss was out there with us, and there was a woman in her vehicle. And after we had gotten the arrest and he was in handcuffs, he walked over to the woman and says, "Hey, you can move on now." And she said, "No, I can't." And she was just frozen. So that can happen too.
Okay, so when people ask, like, what's some of the craziest stories that you've seen? What are some of the craziest stories that you've seen? Is there a go-to?
I do have the craziest story. I don't know if it's going to be appropriate.
Anything's appropriate. Yeah.
Okay.
Hey, it's Peter. I just wanted to pause real quick and let you know that the story that Eric is about to tell, I wanted to leave in because it shows the reality of kind of the day-to-day cases and darkness that he was dealing with. However, this is a rather graphic and disturbing story. It leaves me speechless. And so if that's just not really why you listen to this, or you're not interested, feel free to go ahead and skip ahead to 29:15. I promise you won't really miss anything. If you get halfway through and you're like, oh, I want to jump, what was that time? The time is 29:15. So, yeah, okay. Just wanted to give you that heads up. Now, back to the show.
So agents like to sit around and tell stories. And I think it's the way we process what we've been through, in a sense, going, hey, wasn't that crazy? And then implicit is, yeah, and we're still alive. So great. And sometimes it's to work through things that you never thought you would see. So when we'd be sitting around telling stories, there was always, people trying to top each other. And I would tell them, you go ahead, and then I'll finish. And so I would tell them the story about a 26-year-old man in the Sandusky, Ohio area that we had a search warrant and arrest warrant for distribution of child pornography. So I was on the search, and we had him in handcuffs being interviewed. We had a computer forensic analysis team going through his phone. And then I was in his bedroom with others, and I was going through his closet. And three things triangulated at once as I pulled out a backpack from his closet, and it had plastic bags, rags, tape, and gloves. And I started thinking, this is this guy's bag that he uses to go out and offend. And then I pulled out, and I was wearing gloves too, a pair of very soiled underwear, which I was puzzled at. And as I was looking at that, the forensics team was going through photos of his phone, and then the interviewers were finding out that this young man was a coprophage. And I don't know if you're familiar with the term.
Not at all.
Copro, Greek for poop, and phagus, meaning to eat.
Oh.
So the items that I saw in his backpack were for him to go to public restrooms, and he would stop up the toilets, and then he would go back later to do what he referred to as poop farming of other people's defecation.
How in the world does someone get to that point in their life?
I'm not done.
Oh, wow.
He would also take it and put it in saran wrap into a mold and freeze it and use it to insert into himself. Now I'm done. So, and to your question, he was asked, like, how do you get here? And he said, and this was maybe 15 years ago, he said, I was introduced to pornography at age 12, which oddly enough is the average age that boys are introduced to pornography now. And he said, I just went down a descending path that many others don't go down until he found a place where that's what he needed to satisfy the darkness in him.
Man, I just have I have so many questions. I guess at that point, though, for the FBI, obviously your job's kind of done once he's arrested. But for people like that, is there help for them? Like once they're inside, or not really?
There's going to be therapists. I've spoken with prison therapists, and their job is really keeping people from suicide. There's not a whole lot that can be done. So I don't know what would be done to help him. What I found so often, though, with people like him, those who were, what society would call perverts, the pedophiles, I don't need to tell them that they're disgusting.
Yeah.
They hate themselves already. Most will confess right off the bat. I had a guy confess before we got into the second room of the house to clear it, like he was already admitting to what he had done. So they're full of shame. As much as the world hates them, they hate themselves possibly more. And so coming in and not telling them how disgusting they are, but instead just speaking normally to them as if, yeah, here, you broke the law, and I'm not going to put further judgment on it. They would often just open right up and tell what they needed to tell.
Is there like a pastoral heart? I mean, obviously you preached for 10 years or whatever. Is there like a pastoral heart that comes out a little bit, or is it just kind of you're FBI, so you have to?
I think in some ways it is manipulative.
Uh-huh.
It's for the good because we're trying to bring justice and safety to the community. But I also I can be bad cop. That's easy. It feels much better to be bad cop, but it just doesn't get things done. And there were many, there's classifications of bad people. So there's guys who break the law, and then you talk to him and you're like, I don't know, man. I wouldn't even mind being neighbors with this guy. He's he's a nice guy.
Yeah.
And then there's bad guys who are like horrible human beings, and they're just, I've had guys I've worked with who, one was stealing money from a disabled elderly woman, and he was probably the worst person I've ever met. He was disgusting, a terrible human.
My goodness. What would you say is like obviously there's probably a lot, but what would you say is like the reason why people become so bad or so despicable? Is there like an underlying thing that you've seen? Like,
yeah, there've been a lot of different, we helped prevent a mass shooting where we had two 20-couple-year-old kids were going to shoot up a bar, and I think their process was they were tired of life and society, and they wanted to flip a switch, and the best way to do it would be a mass murder, because that definitely would change their life and it would change society. And then there was a guy who was on the same weekend planning on shooting up a synagogue. He had started his young life as a Satanist and then thought, that's not good enough. So he became a Nazi, and then he pledged himself to ISIS because they were better at killing Jews. And he just wanted to kill as many Jews as possible. He grew up without a father. He had a hard childhood. There were definitely factors there. And then I've had white-collar financial cases where people just steal because they had access and they could get away with it.
What's like a crazy white collar? Is it usually just like estate issues, or is it pretty much anything?
There was a case I worked on, a guy who had stolen $22 million, I estimated, from a number of companies, just telling investors that he had a new product. People would give money, and then eventually he's like, some startups make it and some don't. And,
Is that's a crime? I mean, obviously it's a crime. You can't take money, but an investor, there is a sense of risk, no?
Well, there is, except that now I prove the crime by showing he's taking that $100,000 investment and spending it on himself rather than using it to develop the company. And that's where I get to ask people like the stupidest question, but I wanted to make sure it was out there. Did you intend for your $100,000 investment into this company to be used to purchase his Lamborghini? And then people go, no. And I go, okay. I just have to ask that. What was your understanding of this money? Oh, it would go to improve the company.
Yeah, man, 22 million. That's a lot. Is that over a course of like a few years, or was he just a serial, like he was tied to some rich people?
No, it was over a number of years. So he had this goes back to 1997. He was involved with MCI WorldCom back when, if you recall, we used to purchase our long distance minutes for 15 cents, and then somebody else could bundle them and you give you 12 cents. And he did that legitimately and made quite a bit of money, and then started investing in other actual technologies and items. They were real. And then the money that he had investors give him to build out those products, he just pocketed. He would give a little bit to the company, but it was all to himself. And that went from company to company until he had finally ruined all the companies he's been a part of. And he had moved into trading in these fake international bonds that he would claim are worth $100 billion, and he would only get a 1% transaction fee, which is $1 billion.
Only.
And there was a whole community of people who believed in this, but they were all the traders, not the buyers. And so they would try to scam each other back and forth to get somebody to purchase these. And that's where this man and his realtor stepped in and presented a bond and got an investor to give them $500,000 as they said, hey, this is real. And that's where along the way I met someone that I interviewed about this. And I asked, well, do you think these are real? And she said, oh, yes. I've worked with many people who have had these bonds. In fact, I had one client who owned a quad. And I said, okay, can you explain what a quad is? And she said, it's a bond that's worth $2 quadrillion. And I don't know, like maybe there's $2 quadrillion in the world, probably, but that's about it. Like,
What a salesman, though.
$1,000 trillion, and all I want is 1% of that quadrillion, which is more money than anyone has.
Exactly. I mean, good for him. Well, didn't end well, but he had a good run there. So I guess another question that I would have for someone like you is, how does someone come on the FBI's radar?
Yeah, asking for a friend.
Yeah. No, but like when is it through the informants giving you different ideas, or is it through police work, like partnering with local agencies, or is it just kind of all of the above?
Yeah, it is. So, the police might come and say, hey, this really probably would work better federally. So here you go. And that happens plenty of times, or guys just saying, hey, this is a little too complex for us, where maybe there's a victim here, but the bad guy is in Indianapolis. And so, the local police wouldn't be able to manage it as well. It comes from informants who say, hey, I've developed this, or it could be informants that we develop, in that it could come out of a newspaper, where this newspaper is reporting that this city councilman, is dirty and accepts bribes. And we go, oh, okay. So now we try to find somebody in his circle who might confirm that or test that idea. So it comes through that. It comes for our National Threat Operations Center, which is where people call in with their threat tips as well. And those are often, nonsense, old women who are afraid of the wind. And so now we got to find out what the wind's about.
Obviously, this is a current event. I know that the Nancy Guthrie case is obviously all over the news. I believe Trump, he's just sent to the FBI, right? He sent them there?
Well, there would have been interaction with the FBI regardless. So whenever someone is missing and presumed kidnapped, it automatically becomes a federal case, because rather than waiting to see if that person was taken across state lines, we presume that they could be. And so it doesn't have to be a federal case, but it automatically is applicable as a federal case. So without question, the FBI would have come regardless, and at the very least offered their assistance, collaboration, maybe some technology as well.
It seemed like they were talking about the butting the heads between the sheriff and the FBI. Is that like a real thing, a common thing, or not necessarily? Like he wants to do it himself. I don't need you guys. Or most times are they kind of working together?
Most times it's working together. And even if, most times like the FBI will back off, we know the responsibility that the locals have. That's much more their community. That's much more their people. The FBI is a fully United States domestic organization. And, even somebody who's in Los Angeles or Miami, yes, they live there and they work there, but it's not the same as that local police or that sheriff's office. So usually we are respecting them. We're deferring to them. And there's some work together to say, most times people realize, hey, if this is taken federally and he's charged federally, he's going to get a bigger hit. So, yep, we're all for it. Let's work together. Here's our information.
Got it.
That's usually how it's done. And we often have local task force officers working with us, sometimes writing state search warrants for the furtherance of federal investigations.
Do you think that it was a kidnapping?
Yeah, I don't know. The evidence so far and the way that's being presented and treated seems like, it could have just been a homicide.
Yeah.
Covered in a kidnapping to buy more time.
You have a book coming out.
The working title right now is Irreverend, because I was a reverend and I did irreverent things along the way.
I love it. And so what's the book about? Is it mainly about FBI stories? Is it about your time as a pastor into the FBI, or?
It's both. I start out with the idea of where I came from, but running through the book is not just some of the cases that we've talked about and more in depth, but how I learned from ministry and applied some of that into what I was doing investigating the FBI. So every chapter has stories, some crazy ones along the way, some interesting insight into how the FBI works cases. And then I follow on with what is an after action review. And that's just a look back to what went right on this case, what went wrong and why, and how are we successful? What could we have done better? And then maybe a few more vignettes of some interesting aspects of a case.
I'm not going to ask you to give away the book, but when you say like what went wrong, what could go wrong? Obviously, a person getting shot through the door isn't a good start, but
part of me working crimes against children, there's a lot that would go wrong just of the frustration of trying to reach out to teenage prostitutes. So it's not necessarily what we did wrong. It might have been what we were unsuccessful trying to convince a 15-year-old runaway who's never seen adults in her favor, trying to convince her that, hey, we're here to help you. And, I've gotten slapped and spit on and girls yelling at me because the guy that I'm arresting is their soulmate who has been manipulating them. So it could be aspects like that along the way.
How do you convince someone that obviously I know that you're a good guy, but like someone that doesn't trust you, how do you convince them to trust you?
For me, and again, it's on the spot to be begging someone to say, well, you don't know me, but you have to trust me. I found that the openness and honesty would often help. And so if I'm talking to a criminal and I want him to trust me, I tell him, look, if we're going to have a conversation, I need you to waive your rights. But also, if you want to stop talking, you can. And some cops will go, try to, be quiet about that. And I'll tell them, like, if you don't want to answer a question, I'd rather have you just say, I'd rather not answer that than lie to me. And I'll respect you if you say that. And I try to set it up like, hey, I'm wanting to help you. I'm creating an environment that I'm hoping you feel most comfortable in, and you realize you have some control. And that's not necessarily true, but I'm hoping you see that. And now you feel open to sharing more than you should. And then sometimes, like with the teen prostitutes, I'm a funny guy. So I'd get them to laugh, and all of a sudden, like, oh, okay, these cops are normal people.
Was there ever an instance where, you got someone and they're like, yeah, I'll lead you to so-and-so? Is there ever an instance where they then were like, their intention was never that, they were just trying to buy more time to get free or something, or not really? It's kind of hard at that point.
I've definitely interviewed or interrogated subjects who just, will lie. They'll talk to me for an hour or 2 hours, but never concede what they've done. I had an infamous informant once who stole our recorder. And so while it's also transmitting, and so we can hear what he's doing, but he's driving off. And I mean, people will do crazy stuff too. So there's an amount that you have to trust people. And then also I'm guarded, my hands on my gun in the meantime too.
What's that conversation like when you're trying to go get the transformer back? Are you just, we're like, we know?
Yeah, you're out, we're done with you. I mean, this guy, he was in on a pretty large drug dealer. And so, we're looking past a lot of his problems because he's the one guy who can get us this dope dealer. And there just came a point where like, we can't trust you. You're terrible.
When did you stop working drug cases, or was it kind of always throughout?
I stopped working drug cases in 2007. There were 2 drug squads in Chicago, and in 2007, they dissolved mine.
Okay.
I presume that's because we had solved the drug problem in Chicago, and it was all maintenance from there on.
Yeah, there's no more drugs in Chicago, right? You guys did it.
We're watching you. We're watching you.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that kind of actually was going to be my next question. Is the drug scene, like the war on drugs, is that getting any better?
Well, I mean, the fentanyl's worse than when I was involved. We were doing heroin and crack and powder cocaine as well. The powder was much easier to deal with, but yeah, the fentanyl, golly, that's been very significant. It's very powerful, and it's very easy to get a hold of. So I don't know that it's gotten better. And the problem with that, as I joke about maintenance, it's just a continuous battle in the drug war, but there has to be some type of consequences for bringing the drugs in. And so that's why you have to just keep trying to arrest these people and say, you can't just do that. At the least, it'll slow you down to look over your shoulder or to cover your tracks so that you don't just sell drugs with impunity. So the idea that the DEA or the FBI is out there at least keeps things mitigated.
And so you work pretty closely with the DEA?
No, we worked pretty in opposition of the DEA. They would always step on our cases, and
not a good relationship.
Yeah. And I mean, at the same time in Toledo, I worked with DEA agents closely and on separate stuff, and they were great. And then one of my colleagues who worked drugs hated them, and they hated him. So it can be tough. I mean, once everybody starts working up to the apex and it's the same guy and I get up on his phone, but then you've got a guy who can buy off of him. Now we're fighting, and everybody wants to get that done.
I did a project. I don't know if I can actually share the technology that they had, but I did a video project with the DEA, and they were sharing this software. And I was just shocked at what they were able to do when it comes to surveillance. And I'm sure that you guys could do something very similar, but
probably.
Cameras can be placed anywhere, and they can look like normal. You wouldn't even realize that you're being recorded. But if they want to see a street corner, they can survey that street corner, and no one would ever know.
Yeah, one of my buddies is a tech agent, and they put cameras in things. And his favorite thing would be like, he'd toss me something. He goes, "Where's the camera?" And you'd look around, and like, I'm already at an advantage because I know there's a camera. So you just seeing me wear this shirt, have this watch, wear these shoes, hold this purse. You're not thinking, where's the camera? But even there, me being told, find the camera, I'm like, is that it? Nope.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
That's crazy. So another thing that you see in in like movies and stuff, kind of on a similar line, is if they're like bugging a room or something like that. Is that happening beforehand? Like, are you entering someone's apartment to bug a room?
Yeah, and we've done that before. Like, we could get, again, a surreptitious search warrant where we can go into a house, and we've done that, and we've got teams who do that professionally and do an install. And it may be tracking software on a computer. It could be taking pictures of items to be used later for an affidavit. It could be planting bugs in the house. And again, that's the same level as a Title III, a wiretap. If I'm putting a bug or a camera in your house, I've got to hit that highest of thresholds because it's insanely intrusive.
Is there ever a time where they, I don't know how close you're monitoring, but where they can tell something's off? Because in the movies too, I mean, again, it's Hollywood, so who knows? But they'll be like, yeah, I think my room's bugged. And so I'm thinking like The Sopranos or something like that. Is that just all drama, or have you ever come across a situation like that?
We have. I remember that we were on a wiretap and we were doing surveillance. And while we followed the guy, I thought we were doing a pretty good job. But then he was on the phone, said, hey, man, I've got a tail. This blue Caprice keeps following me. And I'm like, well, there's nobody on our team with a blue Caprice. So we got burned, even though it wasn't us. And then,
That's kind of crazy.
And we've had people like saying, hey, I'm hearing clicking on the phone. I think this is tapped. And like, that's, a wiretap goes through the phone company. So there's no, clip, that alligator clip that goes on a box. So there's nothing physical that should be causing a click in a phone.
Did that actually happen at one point though, where there was a click?
Probably, yeah, but like the guy's got bad reception. It's not us. So yeah, he thinks he's tapped, and he is, but that's not why he should think he's tapped. It's his phone's just making noises.
What is one? I guess to close, what is one story that we can look forward to in your book?
Well, the long drawn out story, I've got 3 chapters that covers the crazy people involved in that long financial investigation. We had many interesting subjects there. One of which was a pastor out in Corona, California, who tortured a young boy from his church. So crazy stuff there. And along the way, the main subject was telling people that I was having sex with his wife, which unfortunately, I get accused without the enjoyment of the sex. She divorces him and he marries another woman. And then I was having sex with her too. She divorced him after 2 months, and then I was having sex with his girlfriend. So I was having sex with so many women in this guy's life without the actual product. So yeah, it was disappointing.
Man, pastors, they're always, it seems like they're always like the subject of double lives.
A lot of accusations. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Eric, thank you so much. And we'll be sure I'll post, when your book comes out, maybe we'll have you back sometime because this was a fun conversation. And do you think you'll ever go back into the pulpit or no?
It would be great because now I have the stories to tell. Like when I would sit in church, the pastor would always like start to tell, like he goes, a man was out fishing with his wife. And I told my wife, there's never an illustration or story I haven't heard. I've heard them all. And so I turned to her and was like, and the duck jumped in the boat. And he tells the story and he says, and then the duck jumped in the boat. And like every time. These stories, people don't know the ending to.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome.
Unless they read the book.
Well, I'm looking forward to reading it and checking it out. And again, thank you for having us or thank you for being on. And I hope you have a happy retirement, I guess, your retirement. What are you doing with your job, with your life now? Just promoting the book?
promoting the book for now, and then we'll see what rolls out of it from there.
Watching the Brewers.
Watching the Brewers, maybe I'm thinking senior modeling.
Yeah.
I mean, why waste this?
Oh no, you got it. Plus, you have the the sex appeal in that pastor's mind. So
Absolutely.
there you go.
We know at least